Hello there, 7th graders! Are you busy preparing for your exams? Do you need help? Well, that's why I'm here. Here you will find a quick revision of all your chapters from Honeycomb, where you can go through the plot, summary, characters of all of these chapters in a quick, easy and fun way. So what are you waiting for? Let's start! Before we get started with the summary of the chapter itself, it's important to know a little bit about the author. The author of this particular story is Leo Tolstoy. Now, Leo Tolstoy is a very famous Russian author, and some of you must know about his really famous novel called War and Peace. It is a really fat book and it's very, very famous. It's a classic. Now, Leo Tolstoy lived from 1828 to 1910, so a long time ago. He was Russian. He was nominated for the Nobel Prize for Literature a number of times, but unfortunately never won it. Well, he's still a very well-respected author, and today we are going over a retelling of one of his stories. So this story wasn't written exactly like this. It has been retold for your chapter. So, what happens in your story? Now, a king is plagued or bothered by three particular questions. These questions are: what is the right time to do something? Which are the people that he should listen to or keep close to him? And what is the most important thing for him to do? Now, these are questions that we all might think about, but since he was a king, it was very important for him to find the answers to these three philosophical questions. And so he sent his messengers out to all the wise men in his kingdom to get answers to these questions. Now, for the first question, what is the right time to do something? All the wise men gave different answers. They said that, you really cannot predict what the time is, so you might need a magician to tell you what the right time to do something is. You can make a timetable for yourself, a strict timetable, and follow it, so you'll know what the right time to do everything is. For the second question, again, who should you listen to? Some wise men said you should listen to your counselors, people in your council. Other wise men said that you should perhaps listen to your soldiers, you should listen to magicians, like mentioned before. And then for the third question, again, they all gave different answers. Some said that the most important thing for you to do is science. Others said that the most important thing for you to do is religious worship. Some said fighting is the most important. And like that, the people that you should keep close to you, some said doctors, some said priests, some said magicians. So a bunch of different answers, and the king was not satisfied with any of these answers, so he decided that I am going to go to a hermit to seek answers for my questions. Now, who's a hermit? A hermit is a person who lives in solitude. That means he lives alone and lives a very simple life. We can say, jaise sadhu sant bolte hain, that is a hermit. So the king went in normal clothes because the hermit only met normal people, and when he went to the hermit, he saw that the hermit was digging. And the hermit was very old and weak. So as soon as the king noticed that he was digging something, he offered to help. So he asked the hermit his three questions and then started helping the hermit dig. The hermit did not give answers to the questions, so the king just kept digging, and he dug one bed, then he dug another bed. A bed is a patch of land where you can sow seeds to plant different things. So after digging two beds, the king again said, why don't you give me the answers now, and if you don't want to give me the answers, then just let me know and I'll return back home. At this point, it had already gotten a little dark. Sunset had happened. King and the hermit saw that a man was running towards them, and that man had his hands to his stomach, and there was blood oozing out of there. They realized that he was a wounded man. As soon as the man got there, the king started helping the man. He saw that there was a lot of blood, so he put a kerchief on it. He redressed the wound, matlab usme dobara patti ki, and when the man asked for water, he got fresh water for the man, and the hermit and the king took the man inside. Now, helping the man and digging all day long made the king very tired, so he ended up sleeping in the hermit's hut. The next morning he woke up and found this strange man next to him. That man looked at the king and said, "Forgive me." Now, it took a second for the king to realize where he is and what is going on. And then as soon as he realized, he said, "Why should I forgive you? What have you done?" And the man said that, "You might not recognize me, but I know who you are. I am an enemy of yours. So you killed my brother and took away my property by force, seized my property. And ever since that, I've been trying to take my revenge. So as soon as I found out that you are going to this hermit's hut, I decided to hide so that I could attack you on your way back to the palace. But because you didn't return to the palace, I came out of my hiding place where your bodyguard found me and he attacked me. I ended up bleeding, wounded, and if you hadn't helped me, I would have died. So I was trying to take your life, but you ended up saving my life." Now to this, the king said, and then the man said that, "Because you saved my life, I am forever loyal to you. I am your faithful servant from this day on." Now the king said, "Okay," and the king earned a loyal, faithful servant, and they were enemies, so they were enemies no longer. So there was no threat on the king ki there is somebody out there who will or can attack me. After all of this was done, the king went out and saw that the hermit was sowing seeds in the beds that they dug the previous day. And before leaving, the king decided that I'll ask him one more time if he can answer my 3 questions. What are the 3 questions? The right time to do something, which people should he listen to, and what is the most important thing to do. Now to this, the hermit said, "Your questions have already been answered." Now the king got a little confused and said, "How?" And the hermit explained that when you were digging the beds, because you took pity on me, that was the right time for you to be doing that. That was the most important thing for you to be doing. And because you were helping me, I was the most important person at that point. And the most important thing for you to do was to help me. Because you did all of these things at that time, you didn't go back to your palace. Because if you had gone back to your palace, that man would have attacked you. And then after that, when that wounded man came running, the right thing, the most important thing for you to do at that time was to help that man. The most important person was that wounded man, and the most important thing for you to do was to help him. Because you did all of those things, that man turned from your enemy to your most loyal and faithful servant. The hermit explained that the right time to do something, the most important time to do something, and the most important thing to do, the people that he should be listening to or helping, all of it depends on the present moment, whatever is happening now. Because now is the only time where we have any power to act. You cannot go to the past and do something. You cannot go to the future and do something. The only time when you can act is now. The most important person for you to help, the most important person for you at that time is the person you're with, because you don't know what will happen next to that person or to yourself, whether you'll meet again. You don't know how life is going to turn out. So that is the most important person, the person you should keep close to you or listen to. And the most important thing for you to do is to be good and kind, because that is why we are all here on this earth, to be nice human beings and good and kind to each other. That brings us to the end of this story. I hope that made you understand the story a little bit better, and it's a very nice learning that we've gotten from this, to live in the present moment, to act in the present moment, to be nice and kind to the people around us. Today we are going over chapter 2, which is A Gift of Chappals by Vasant Surya. So let's get to it. Now, as I just told you, A Gift of Chappals is a story written by Vasant Surya, and it's about the innocence of children and their mischievous nature, and how, despite everything, all the naughtiness that they do, they still have a heart of gold. So it starts off with this young girl called Mridu, who is visiting her aunt Rukmani's house. She, along with her grandmother Tapi, go to Aunt Rukmani's house. And as soon as Aunt Rukmani opens the door for Mridu, her two cousins come rushing out. And as soon as the two cousins come rushing out, they try to drag Mridu back to the backyard. Meanwhile, Mridu notices that there are these chappals outside the house. They're black chappals, but they're covered in dust, so they've turned grey. And she could see the print of the foot on each chappal. And she could make out that the toes on the chappals were really long, thin. And she just looked at those odd chappals and wondered for a second whom they belonged to. But she didn't have much time to think about it because her two cousins, Ravi and Meena, dragged her to the backyard. Now, excitedly, Ravi takes Mridu right to a spot in the backyard where he has a little kitten who is kept in a football. And that little kitten is drinking milk out of a coconut shell. And Ravi talks about how it's such a difficult job to hide this little pet animal from the rest of his family, because if Pati, his grandmother, finds out that there is a kitten in the house, then she will leave immediately. He also talks about how it's so difficult to get milk also for this kitten, because he had to lie to his Pati. He had to say that he wants to drink milk so that Pati wouldn't suspect anything. And he quickly went out, gave the milk to the kitten, ran back to the kitchen, washed the tumbler himself, and all of this that he had to do for this little cat. Then he starts talking about the ancestry of this little cat. He says that this cat is very, very special because it's a descendant of the cat which was in the Pallava emblem. Now, Pallava was a dynasty long time ago, and they had an emblem which was a lion. And according to Ravi, this little kitten right here was a descendant of that Pallava, Mahabalipuram Rishi cat, Pallava lion. And in fact, that Pallava lion was also a descendant of an Egyptian cat god. So he has this cooked up story about his little kitten, and he has named the little kitten Mahendran, which Mridu finds very amusing because it's a real name and not a cute kitty cat name. And in fact, Ravi says it's not just Mahendran, it's Mahendra Varma Pallava Punnai, MP Punnai for short. So Mridu and Meena give a look to each other and they sort of laugh internally at Ravi and how he loves talking and he makes up all of these stories. As this is happening, suddenly they hear this really bad screechy sound from the house, and they look and they see that Lalli, the Ravi and Meena's sister, Mridu's other third cousin, is learning how to play the violin. And she's doing a really bad job. And next to her is her violin teacher, this bony man with a bony structure, who's almost bald, just had a few tufts of hair, oiled hair on his head, wearing a gold chain and a diamond ring and a veshti, which is a dhoti. And he's sitting and playing the violin very easily, as if it just comes very naturally to him, like a train falls naturally on its tracks. Whereas Lalli playing the violin sounded like the train was going off track or the train was derailing. So they make fun of Lalli a little bit, observe the violin teacher, and then go about their business. At this point, they see that they go about their business in the sense that they go to the room and they're peeping inside Lalli and the teacher's room and seeing what's happening. Now at this point, suddenly, they hear someone cry out and they realize it's a beggar. Now this beggar used to come frequently to their house, and as soon as Rukmani hears the beggar call out, she asks Ravi to send him away, and the beggar hears Rukmani screaming that out loud and says that, oh, please don't do that. It's because of these kind ladies of the house that I have been surviving for so long, and I know you will help me out and you won't turn me away. But Pati says that, he comes every day and this is not okay, so we need to send him away. We're not giving him anything today. Now, these three kids, they see the beggar, and when they're trying to send him away, they notice that his feet are really blistered. And the beggar also says that it's so hot outside, even if you're not giving me anything, at least let me rest for a little while, because the tar on the road is so hot and I don't have chappals and my feet cannot take it. Now, looking at the state of the beggar's feet and how he was expressing his own pain and agony, Mridu felt really sad. She started tearing up and she said that it's not fair. He needs chappals. And then Ravi, who's the practical one, says, okay, I know it's not fair, but we cannot just say that. We need to do something about it. And my chappals are too small for him. Your chappals are too small for him. So we need to go around the house and look for chappals. Now at this point, suddenly Mridu remembers the weird chappals she saw in the beginning as when she was entering the house. And she goes and gets those and she says, these are perfect. They'll fit the beggar perfectly. So they give away those chappals to the beggar and the beggar happily goes away. Then Lali's violin class gets over. As soon as her violin class gets over, the music teacher and Lali come out and the music teacher starts looking for his chappals, which are nowhere to be found. So then Lali and the music teacher are looking frantically around every corner of the house to find the chappals. And Rukmani comes out. Rukmani looks at the three kids who are usually very naughty but are just silently sitting there under the tree. She is a little suspicious, so she asks, have you seen anybody lurking around? And then she realizes that it's probably them who have done something. So they ask him, did you have anything to do about this? And then they confess that the beggar needed chappals. Their chappals weren't fitting him, so they decided to give away these chappals to him. To this, Mridu thinks that Rukmani is going to get very angry. The music teacher gets very angry, says that, I bought those chappals recently. They were new chappals, which is obviously a lie because they looked very old and dusty. Said I went to Mount Road to get those chappals. Now what am I going to do? And then Ravi, to kind of make up for what he had done, says that you keep telling us stories about Karn who gave away his gold earrings to someone in need. To which Rukmani says that he gave away his things, not other people's things. So this goes on for a little bit and Rukmani says, okay, you know what, I'm just going to go get Gopu Mama's chappals to give to the music teacher. So she goes, she gets Gopu Mama's chappals, which were brand new, gives them to the music teacher. The music teacher is very happy that he's gotten a much better pair of chappals, but he pretends as if he'll just make do with these chappals. So he wears those chappals and he goes away. Now Mridu and the other kids were a little scared that they're going to get a scolding, but instead Rukmani ends up laughing, saying that it's a good thing that Gopu Mama doesn't wear his chappals to work, but I wonder what he's going to say when he comes back and he cannot find his chappals. So that is the end of the summary. And like I told you in the beginning, it's about how these kids, even though they were naughty, had somebody else's best interest in mind. Even though they lied about the kitten, it's because they were caring for the little animal. Even though they gave away someone else's chappal, they gave it away to somebody who was in more need of those chappals. So that is the essence of the story, that innocence and mischief that doesn't hurt other people is what childhood is all about. This chapter is very different from other chapters because it is in the form of a comic book. It is about the season of Hilsa fish. The people of the kingdom, including sellers, buyers, and even the courtiers, were all busy discussing Hilsa fish. One day, a courtier was telling the king about the huge Hilsa fish he had caught. However, the king was fed up with the topic and scolded the courtier. After a while, he apologized for losing his temper and told the courtiers since the season of Hilsa fish started, no one has been able to stop talking about the fish. He said that not even clever Gopal could stop people from talking about Hilsa fish. Gopal said that he actually could stop people from doing so. Then the king challenged him to bring a huge Hilsa fish into the palace without anyone asking him about it. Gopal confidently accepted the challenge. The next day, he started putting his plan into force. He shaved only half of his beard and started smearing his face with ash. His wife, who had noticed everything, questioned him repeatedly about why he was doing such things and what was wrong with him. However, Gopal didn't have time to explain his plan and kept on telling his wife that he was just going out to get Hilsa fish. Then the wife pointed to his shabby clothes, but Gopal didn't pay attention to her. She clearly thought Gopal had gone mad. Gopal bought a hilsa fish and made his way to the palace. On the way, people started pointing at him and laughing at his comical appearance. People began calling him different names. Some called him a madman and others called him a mystic. However, Gopal didn't object as this was his plan. He finally reached the palace and asked the guards to see the king. However, the guards denied him entry after looking at his shabby appearance. He then started singing and dancing. Inside the palace, the noise of commotion was causing the king great discomfort. He finally ordered the guards to let the madman in. When Gopal came in, everyone was astonished to see him like that. The courtiers started whispering amongst themselves. The king demanded an explanation for Gopal's ridiculous fashion. Gopal told the king that he had forgotten something. When the king asked what he had forgotten, Gopal explained that even though he was carrying a hilsa fish with him, no one was asking him about it. Instead, everyone was discussing his appearance. The king laughed and praised him and his wit and congratulated him for achieving the impossible. There once lived an old couple. They had a pet dog and no children. They loved the dog as if it were their own baby. The dog was called Muko. The kind couple fed the dog with their own chopsticks. In return, the dog also loved them a lot. The old man was a farmer. Every morning, Muko followed him to his fields. A heron, which is a type of bird, walked in the footsteps of the old man to pick up worms. Like his master, the dog also never harmed the bird. One day, the dog put his paws against the old man's legs. He motioned with his head to come to a spot behind. To please his pet, the old man followed him. At a little distance from there, the dog stopped and started scratching the ground. To help his pet, the old man struck his hoe into the earth. It revealed a pile of gold before him. So the old man became rich. They gave a feast to their friends and helped their poor neighbors. In the same village, there lived a wicked old man and his wife. They brought Muko into their garden, thinking that he would point to more gold. They gave him food. But the dog was afraid. He neither ate nor moved. They dragged the dog out of the door. They walked with him. When they reached a pine tree, the dog began to scratch the ground. The wicked couple was delighted. They both dug the ground. What they unearthed was a dead kitten. This made the couple very angry. They hit the dog until he died. Then they flung him into the hole they had dug and heaped the earth over the dead body. The incident of the dog's death reached the ears of its owner. They felt so sad, as if they had lost their own son. The old man went to the place where his pet had been buried. He mourned for a long time. He called Muko many dear names as if he was still alive. That night, he saw Muko in his dreams. Muko asked him to cut the pine tree that was at the spot where he was buried and make it into a mortar for his rice pastry. He also asked the old man to make a mill for his bean sauce. The old man did as he was told. With much labor, he made a small bowl of wood. Then he made a long-handled hammer of wood. When the new year drew near, he wanted to make some rice pastry. Him and his wife put the boiled rice into the wooden mortar. The old man used the wooden hammer to pound the mass into a dough. When the pastry was ready for baking, it turned into a mass of gold. Gold dropped like rain when the old woman started grinding bean sauce in the hand mill. At this moment, the envious or jealous neighbor peeped into the window. He decided to borrow the mill with the same hopes that it would give him gold. The old couple readily gave their mill to the neighbor. The man began to pound the rice and his wife began to grind boiled beans. However, this time the pastry and sauce turned into worms. They broke the mill into pieces and decided to use it as firewood. Now, the generous old man dreamt again. The The dog spirit came and told his owner to take the ashes of the burnt mortar and mill from their neighbors and sprinkle them on the withered trees to make them bloom. The old man woke up and went to the wicked couple's house. He humbly asked for the ashes. The couple treated him with contempt, but they let him fill his basket with the ashes. When he returned home, he took his wife to his garden where their cherry tree was withered as it was winter time. The old man sprinkled the ashes on the tree and saw that the tree was now blooming with cherry blossoms. Everyone got to know about this and went to see this wonder. The wicked couple also got to know the story and gathered all the remaining ashes and kept it safe. Meanwhile, the kind old man heard that the daimos or the landlords were to pass along the high road near the village. He took his basket and set off to see him. As the train approached, he climbed up into an old withered cherry tree and stood and waited there. Even though, according to the customs of that time in Japan, he was supposed to lie down, he was standing. However, the guards didn't object or say anything to him, seeing that he was an old man. As the daimo's palanquin drew near, he sprinkled some of the ashes on the withered cherry blossom tree, which made it bloom. The daimo was delighted to see this and stopped the train. Calling the old man to him, he thanked him and ordered presents of silk robes, sponge cakes, fans, and other rewards to be given to him. He even invited him to his castle. The old man went home happily to share this news with his wife. Yet again, the wicked neighbor who heard this story took some of the magic ashes and went out on the highway. He climbed a cherry blossom tree and there he waited for the daimo to come directly under the tree. The man threw a handful of ashes, which didn't do anything. Instead, they fell into the daimo and his wife's eyes when the wind blew, and their eyes and noses started itching and tearing up. They sneezed and choked, which ruined the dignity and elegance of the procession. The man was brought down from the tree and actually beaten to death. Meanwhile, the kind old couple lived a prosperous life. We learn from this chapter that greed is a terrible, terrible thing that only leads to downfall. This story is about a German shoemaker whose name is Mr. Gessler. He is acquainted with the author from his days of youth when the shoemaker used to make boots for the author's father. The shoemaker used to live with his elder brother in their small shop in London. The shop was a bit different than the rest of the shops. There was no sign on the shop except for the name Gessler Brothers written on it, and there were a few pairs of boots in the window. The shoemaker made only what was ordered by the customer, and the shoemaker was so skilled that the boots he made always fit the customer perfectly. The author comments that the boots he made and how he made them seemed mysterious and wonderful. The author had even asked the shoemaker if it was hard to make such boots. The shoemaker smiled and replied that it was an art. The author says that going to his store was very often impossible because the shoes that he made lasted longer than expected. Such was the quality. The shop had the atmosphere of a church, but Mr. Gessler had an unprofessional look with the sleeves of his shirt folded. The author would then put forward his order and the shoemaker would bring a piece of leather. In his German accent, the shoemaker would admire the piece and the author would do so too. The shoemaker would then fix a time for the order to be collected and they would bid each other goodbye, with the shoemaker going back to his dream of boots. One day, the author told Mr. Gessler that the last pair of shoes creaked. The shoemaker, however, said that they shouldn't have creaked and became sorrowful. He then asked the author to bring that pair of boots back and he promised to take a look. He explained that there were some boots that were bad from the start, and if the boots happened to be damaged beyond repair, he would take them off his bill. The author immediately regretted mentioning this to Mr. Gessler. On another occasion, the author went to Mr. Gessler's store absent-mindedly wearing store-bought boots that he had bought in an emergency. Mr. Gessler observed each and every part of his boots. He said that he had not made those boots and even pointed where the boots was hurting the author's feet. The shoemaker harshly commented on these big firms and how the advertisements had been taking away his customers. For the first time, he talked of his hardships. The author felt so bad for the shoemaker that he ordered many pairs of boots which last him 2 years because of the good quality. After a few months, when he visited Mr. Gessler's store, he got to know that Mr. Gessler's elder brother had died. Again, the author ordered many pairs of boots. After that, the author spent over a year abroad. When he came back, he visited Mr. Gessler's store and found him very old and worn. Mr. Gessler didn't even recognize the author this time. The author ordered all kinds of boots again. After receiving his orders, the author decided to visit Mr. Gessler and thank him for his service. However, when he reached the location, he got to know from the new owner that Mr. Gessler had died of starvation. The owner went on to say that Mr. Gessler lost all his customers because of his slow speed and because he never advertised his store. Mr. Gessler would never stop working on boots and never use a penny to feed himself. He said that Mr. Gessler was a character, but he made good boots. The author, with a heavy heart, also said that Mr. Gessler made good boots. Expert Detectives is an extract taken from Sharda Dwivedi's children's novel, The Broken Flute. Maya and Nishad are siblings aged 10 and 7 respectively. The story deals with their quest of finding out the real identity of a man called Mr. Nath. The story begins with the siblings walking towards their mother's clinic. As they walked, they began talking about Mr. Nath. He had been living at Shankar House for over a year and had hardly made any friends. He seemed unfriendly and even the kids at Shankar House were terrified of him. More importantly, he had some burn scars, which Maya believed were caused by an encounter with the police. Maya was suspicious of Mr. Nath and believed that he was a crook. However, Nishad thought that the man was poor and lonely. Nevertheless, they decided to play the part of detectives and investigate the matter. While investigating, Nishad talked to Ramesh, a restaurant worker who delivered food to Mr. Nath. Through him, Nishad learned that Mr. Nath always takes only 2 meals a day and the menu was always the same: chapati, some vegetables and dal. He then paid his bill immediately and even tipped generously. Moreover, Mr. Nath had a visitor on most Sundays. He was a tall, fat, fair, spectacled and talkative man whom Maya believed was an accomplice or a partner in crime. Later, Maya listed out 9 known facts about Mr. Nath on a paper with "Catching a Crook" as its title. Eventually, Nishad and Maya got into an argument due to the difference in their opinions. Maya began the investigation intending to expose Mr. Nath's identity, while Nishad only went along because he wanted to understand why Mr. Nath looked poor and lonely. He also decided to befriend Mr. Nath because he liked him and felt sorry for him. The story ends with them vehemently disagreeing with each other. If you would like to know what happens next, then you can read The Broken Flute. The Invention of Vita Wonk is a story about Mr. Willy Wonka, the owner of the chocolate factory, who had invented something called Wonka Vitae. This made people younger, but it was too strong. After taking this, there was a rapid decrease in age and some people disappeared because their age had reached minus. One person's age had become minus 87. So he had to wait for 87 years to become visible to others. Mr. Wonka had to invent something new to reverse these changes. He became busy searching for a new recipe that would make people older. He asked Charlie about what was the oldest thing in the world. Charlie said that it was probably a tree. Mr. Wonka agreed and said that it is the bristlecone pine trees growing on the slopes of Wheeler Peak in Nevada, USA. This tree had lived longer than anything else. Mr. Wonka then went into the glass elevator to travel across the world to collect items from some of the oldest living things. He collected a pint of sap from a 4,000-year-old bristlecone pine tree, toenail clippings from a 168-year-old Russian farmer, an egg laid by a 200-year-old tortoise, the tail of a 51-year-old horse, and so on. He also tracked down the whistle pig and other animals and took something from each of them. In his inventing room, after working with all these elements for hours, he prepared a cup full of oily black liquid. He gave 4 drops of it to a 20-year-old Oompa Loompa volunteer. After a bit of shivering and wrinkling, his hair dropped off, his teeth fell out, and the 20-year-old became 75 years old. Thus, the Vida Wonk was invented. And with that, we've completed all the summaries. Subscribe to the channel and all the very best for your exams.